Hello everyone, this is Vijay Lakshmi. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This channel is exclusively meant for law students who are pursuing their LLB and also who are having the zeal to crack some judicial exams like JCDS or DJSM. In this video, I'd like to share the topic on criminal law. In the first slide, I am going to give the introduction to the criminal law. In my intro, I have divided the topics into definition of the crime, difference between tort and crime, importance of mens rea, relevancy of motive, intention and motive, and status of the crime. In the next slide, I am going to give the introduction as to the Indian Penal Code. First of all, let me give you the meaning of the code. Code means the conduct and behavior of the persons in general. That is, it speaks about their behavioral traits. The law expects every individual living in a society to behave in a particular ethical manner. The intention of the legislatures would be no person's unethical or immoral behavior should lead to any discomfort or any problem to other co-livings in the society. We all know that the society is meant for all the individuals, all the human beings who can share and who can enjoy this society commonly and they can derive the common benefit. But we find that in society with the different tastes of people, different fashions, different passions will be there, and but still we are coordinating, trying to coordinate with each other, and we are going to derive some common benefit or common purpose. But still sometimes we find the people with a different behavior for selfish motives who keep doing certain unwanted or unwarranted acts resulting in some humiliation to others. So to settle the behavior of such people, Indian Penal Code was enacted. The state controls the unsocial attitude of the individual with its sole weapons, that is in the form of the statutes. So IPC is the statute which controls the unwanted or unwarranted behavior of the individuals and the persons who are violating the law of the land in the interest of the nation. In that manner only IPC was drafted. IPC was drafted by Lord Macaulay, who was the chairman of the first Law Commission under the Charter Act of 1833, under the Charter of 1834. And but even though it was drafted in the year 1834, but it was put to several amendments and several revisions have undergone, and from time to time as per the requirements and necessities of the people. And therefore, the final shape to this Indian Penal Code could come into force in the year 1816. But later it has got the assent of the then Governor General, and finally it came into force in the year 1862. IPC consists of total 511 sections and 23 chapters divided. IPC is purely a substantial piece of legislation, just like Indian Contracts Act and other piece of legislations like TP Act, and we also know as Hindu Marriage Act and some other pieces of substantial pieces of legislation. Here I would like to just give the meaning of the substantial piece of legislation. Generally, in any country, there will be two types of legislations, kinds of legislations. They are substantial piece of legislation and procedural piece of legislation. This substantial piece of legislation is going to give us fixed manner of our rights and duties, and in a theoretical part. That means what we can do, what we cannot do, what we can exercise the rights, what the duties. These type of rights and duties which we can enforce, which where a person is entitled to, can be given in the substantial piece of legislation, which is purely a theoretical part. Opposite to this is procedural laws. Procedural laws are procedural aspects. That means completely which are practical. And that means the procedural laws are more useful than the substantial piece of legislation. The reason behind it is this: without procedural mechanism, that means where one person cannot know the procedure, how to enforce or how to get back his rights, this substantial piece of legislation will not have any purpose to serve. The procedural mechanisms are very much important on par with the substantial piece of legislations, because the procedural mechanisms are pouring life into the substantial. Here we are having altogether three types of procedural mechanisms, that is Criminal Procedural Code 1973 and Civil Procedural Code 1908, and along with Evidence 1872. These three are procedural laws which are pouring life into number of different pieces of substantial legislation. Without this evidence, without this procedural mechanism, the substantial piece of legislation will not serve any kind of to us. Now, before going to the a little bit depth into the topic, preliminarily we have to know what is the definition of the crime. Every person generally will be under the impression that since the title of the subject is criminal law, the criminal law is going to define the word crime. But we don't find the definition to the word crime in IPC statute book. In general, crime is a antisocial behavior. It is nothing but an act or omission which is prohibited under any lawful land. The word crime means and connotes the meaning that doing the acts which are forbidden under the law, and it is treated as a public wrong or wrong against the state. We all know that to administer and to govern the people of any country, the country shall have its own rules and regulations, and the persons who are violating those rules and regulations can be treated as criminals. Since the state is the safeguarder, state is the safeguardian of the interest of the people, and it has to look after the welfare of the people. It is going to just see the it is going to see the welfare of the people by enacting different pieces of legislations, and through these legislations as weapons, the state is trying to control the unwanted and unsocial behavior of the people. However, the people of the country, we are bound to follow the strictures passed by the state. If the people deviate from such code of conduct, an action can be taken against such individuals, such violators, and can be penalized as per the criminal law proceedings of the country. So the crimes may be of two kinds. They may be against a person, they may be against property. Now come to the difference between crime and offense. All offenses are crimes, but all crimes are not offenses. This is the famous quotation in criminal law. It implies to mean that the crime is genus and the word offense is its species. Crime means in general it is antisocial behavior. All the general nature of wrongs may be called as crimes, but the wrongs which are legally recognized by the state and entered into the statute book, then only they become the offences. Otherwise, the wrongs will remain as crimes only without any specific punishments. However, one has to just here try to get the point. Crime is a general word. Any act or any deed that may appear to be a crime to one's eyes, but it may not be so to the other's eyes. So, the notion of the crime differs from person to person, group of persons to group of persons, one society to the other, one state to another, and one country to the another country. So all wrongful deeds, though we are in our general language, we may call that it is a crime, but still unless and until such type of crimes, if they don't find any place in the statute book of IPC, we can't say that they are the offences. The IPC is going to punish only the offences but not the crimes. Now come to the next important difference between tort and crime. We know that a tort is a civil wrong, a civil mistake. That means violation of the civil rights resulting in some loss, civil loss to the other individuals. Civil law, we are having two parallel laws here, civil law and also criminal law. Civil law completely deals with the civil rights, civil duties, civil right violations, whereas criminal law deals with completely crimes area, criminal in nature. But still we have to just try to differentiate between these two. One has to know the essential differences between tort and crime, especially as being the law student. Now let us focus on the differences. Nature of the wrong, the first one which I have taken is nature of the wrong. Tort is a civil wrong or a private wrong. It is the wrong against the individual. It means it is a wrongful act committed by a person towards another individual or individuals. It is violation of completely the legal rights or other civil rights and causing some monetary loss or economic loss to them. And whereas crimes, it is a criminal wrong and it is a wrong which can be known as public wrong. It is considered as offense against the state. In case of criminal mistakes, we never find that there is a violation of rights or violation of duties. That question generally will not be looked into by the judiciary. while they are trying the criminal matters. In crimes, generally, we don't see whether there is violation of rights, violation of duties or taking place or not. We don't see, just we are focusing on the mind of the wrongdoer only. Be concentrated in criminal mistakes. But in civil mistakes, we are seeing, looking into the matter, whether there is any violation of the rights is taking place. The next difference is initiation of the legal proceedings when the tort is committed. That means who are proceeding first legal proceedings is the matter. Why we are taking into consideration this matter means the person who is injured, he only has to move to the court and he has to get the relief or he has to ask for the redress. On behalf of one person, generally we don't see that the other persons are moving to the court and the court is not going to give us any relief because of that locus standi. That means the person who is moving to the court, he has to show that he has got some interest in the subject matter of the litigation. Who has to initiate the legal proceedings is big question. In case of the tort, the injured party whose rights are injured and who has been put to some loss, who has been put to some injury, he only has to move to the court and he has to get in, he has to try for to get some relief from the court. But in case of the criminal wrongs, the state is going to take the initiatives and the state is going to file the litigations on behalf of the victims. That means in torts, in civil wrongs, the injured party has to move to the court, whereas in crimes, the state will move to the court on behalf of the victims and it is going to initiate the legal proceedings. Now come to the burden of proof. Burden of proof is nothing but burden of proving the wrong that the other party is at wrong. Burden of proving. Burden of proving what we are proving, we are trying to prove that the other party is wrong. This burden, this risk always will be lying on the part of the injured party, that is plaintiff in case of civil litigations, but whereas it be on the prosecution, on the shoulder of the prosecution, that the prosecutors have to prove that the guilt of the accused. Burden of proof lies in case of crimes on the part of the prosecution, but in case of the civil litigations and a tort, it lies on the plaintiff, which is essential difference. And now go to the next remedy, that is next difference, that is remedies. Under tortious acts, civil mistakes, the remedy that is available to the injured parties, unliquidated damages. This unliquidated damages and also sometimes we also often find injunction orders and mean profits may also be awarded as compensatory reliefs in case of the civil mistakes, civil wrongs, tortious acts. But in case of crimes, the remedy generally will not be in the kind of the damages. We find it in the form of punishments. Those punishments may be in the form of imprisonments, and in some cases it may be death penalties to be imposed. But nowadays, with the recent developments, we are finding that even in criminal cases also, some compensations in terms of money are going to be paid to the victims. And in the next difference, we come to the next and last difference, that is element of mens rea. To constitute the tort, mens rea will not be considered. Mens rea means purely a mental element. Mental element of the wrongdoer, that means what is the set of his mind while doing the act, whether it is good or bad, with evil intention he did it, wantonly he did it. These type of questions will not arise in case of the torts, but it will only be considered in case of the crimes. Mens rea is only the very important criteria for fixing the punishment. If the accused person is not at wrong, he may get immediately the acquittal orders. The burden of proving that the accused is wrong and his mind is wrong, that is to be on the prosecutors to prove it. So the guilty mind is very important for the crimes, but the mind of the guiltiness will not be there in case of torts. Irrespective whether the mind is evil or not, if any particular act is resulting any loss, any injury, any harm to the other person, immediately civil suit lies. But in case of crimes, unless if the party's mind is not at evil motive, then generally he is going to get the acquittal orders in case of the crimes. That means mens rea will play a major role in crimes, and mens rea will not be having that much importance in TOTS, but only in few cases, exceptional cases, Men's-Rea will be taken into consideration. In this video, I am winding up with these differences, and in the next video, I am going to upload further information as to the first part. Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.